feel like Kobe in the fourth quarter.
This is the Dane Moore NBA podcast. We're brought to you by Prize Picks. Coming a Monday morning, it's November 4th, and the plan for today is to recap the Wolves weekend, a comeback win against Denver on Friday night. That was fueled by Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Anthony Edwards, and then kind of shut down by Rudy Gobert there at the end. And then they kind of, in less than 24 hours, go to San Antonio for a Saturday evening loss against the Spurs on a back-to-back. They just kind of looked like they got outworked by Victor Wembanyama, Chris Paul, Jeremy Sohan, Keldon Johnson. They all had big games. I have Wolves beat writer Jace Frederick here with me. And Jace, I thought we'd, as I sent to you in the email, I thought we'd start by talking about Rudy in these games, because I thought the Friday game against the win against Denver was just like classic Rudy, like just quintessential, right? Like he gets dunked on and it's embarrassing, and then he kind of comes back to win the game in that exact situation and sort of turn up the dial with a minute left in the game. Really impressive. One of my favorite Rudy Gobert games. But then Saturday he looked rough. He could not really keep up with the Wembanyama, and again back to back. We'll talk about that some too. But it was really jarring to me to watch Gobert play and be like, you kind of look too small or not physical or whatever. Obviously, a lot of that is Wembanyama, but Gobert had a really rough game. Only had 3 rebounds.
Yeah, that was weird.
Right? I was looking at that. Then his name yesterday comes up on the injury report with the left ankle sprain. So I guess I give a little bit of something to that ankle sprain. Definitely give something to the back-to-back. That was a very rough back-to-back, but it's becoming so clear right at the beginning of the season how important Rudy Gobert is to this team, in just kind of how generally thin they are up front this year.
Literally thin. Like they're thin. Like they're not. It's like everybody is thin.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
except, well, I guess he's kind of thin too. They just, it's different than last year. Rudy's the only big guy,
right?
And it's clear that they need him and probably need a little bit more size. What did you just make of this Gobert weekend and kind of where we're at the center position thus far?
Yeah, I'm with you on the Friday thing for sure. I mean, I'm with you on all of it, but the Friday thing was like, you talked about like how it's embarrassing when like Christian Brown like dunks on you and whatnot, and then that's what circulates around social media and whatnot. And that really is kind of like what to some degree I think has not ruined, because I think it's still great, but like hurt basketball is just like the highlight culture of the whole thing. Like that's what circulates. That's what's great. That means this guy sucks and this guy's awesome. And that's just like so not true of like the impact of 48 minutes or whatever. Like has nothing to do with it, frankly. But yet so much of like all sports is consumed by highlights now. So that's where opinions are formed. Because people can't, even like people who like really analyze the game, they can't watch all of it, so it's just like, hey, I saw this, so that backs up this theory or whatever. But Rudy, even after the game, was like, that was a great play, that was a great dunk, like, and he's just like, it's part of his first time, it's part of basketball. And he's right, like plays like that are exciting and they're parts of basketball, but it's just one play in the game. And no matter how loud it is, like it's one play. And Rudy's magic is that the next play he'll be consistently and do what he's asked to do, and then the play after that he'll be consistent and do what he's asked to do. And like Rudy's is not one loud thing, it's just a bunch of plays stacked on top of each other that lead to a great game. And so that I agree with you that it totally is like that is what Rudy is, like it's not, he's not going to be deterred by one thing, he's just going to stay on board, be consistent, keep delivering. Saturday was weird, and it did hit me a little bit, like as versatile as I think this team is in terms of like they can go like wing heavy and stuff now, or you can have Rudy out there and that's 2 different looks. Like it's not so much versatile. And like if there's ever a big where you're like, well, that's not really a great Rudy matchup, you don't really have another way to turn. And I think it is kind of in the thing, like you can't build an NBA roster that's versatile enough to handle everything to where you're like, we have an answer for literally everything. Like you're probably gonna have 10 guys who you might play, and like the Wolves are now really wing heavy, and then they have Rudy. And if they don't have Rudy, and now they will be small. And if there's a matchup, or if Rudy just doesn't have it, if Rudy's hurt, if Rudy's back to back, and Rudy doesn't have the same energy, like there aren't that many places to turn where you won't be small. And that's just kind of the reality of this roster. That was kind of my takeaway. it wasn't my biggest takeaway from the game, but like it definitely was something a little bit eye opening of like, yeah, if he doesn't have it, I don't really know where they go.
Right. And that's it. I mean, I was just thinking about how with this summer we spent obviously pre-cat trade. We're just looking at the kind of evolving depth chart over time, and we're like, all right, point guard, Mike Conley, behind him, Rob Dillingham, like, whoa, how is this going to work? And we had just our eyes in terms of the roster being thin, so turned to that side of the spectrum. Then all of a sudden this trade happens. It really shores up the point guard position by bringing in DiVincenzo. And I wouldn't say just me and you, but like everyone, we just missed this. Like specifically the cat size element of it, how important cat size was to the defense, or at least at a minimum, the defense when Rudy was off the floor. But
And the rebounding is a huge is huge.
I just think I think, credit to Carl. I think I underrated that whole size. Like they would always be like, whoa, the Wolves are so big and long, like last year. And I'd be like, I mean, yeah, not small, but I think that was a little bit more right than I gave it credit for, maybe just in kind of seeing the other side of it. Or I thought Nas could maybe do more of the stuff that Carl did or that Randall would. And that's kind of why I'm leading with this, is I think this is all related to the Reid-Randle front court plays in tandem with, Gobert and whatever this is, or whatever Gobert is or isn't. And it really feels like all the Reid-Randle group can do right now is score alongside another team, and maybe some more defense comes there, but it's not really feeling like it. It's feeling right like, unless Reid-Randle are really going offensively and that group that surrounds them is going offensively, they're going to fall behind because teams are going to score against the Wolves when Nas and Julius are in the game at the center position. I know that's kind of moving around in our outline here, but that's all.
I mean, yeah, the things
that's all related to.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I agree. And it is like defensively, it's like even if it's not like they're not like putting in a good defensive effort or whatever. Like the size is a huge deal. Like when Jokic was in there, and he just had Julius Randle, he would just go like, he doesn't even love to do this, but he's like, okay, I have to just take the layup here. And there's nothing Randle can do about it because Jokic's size is like, he's too big for a lot of people. You can't really go small on him. And the Wolves, they don't have another option unless they wanted to go like Luka Garza. Like it is like the whole thing was mixed up a couple years ago when people were like, well, now the Wolves have 3 centers, and they didn't. And we realized that, and it became less and less true as each year went along. And I was like, no,
Nas lost another 10 pounds.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Yeah. He's even thinner. He's faster and whatnot. And he can chase wings around now, but he's never looked less centerish. If he came out for the draft now, you'd be like, that is not a center. That guy cannot play center. Like,
no,
maybe in like the smallest ball, if you don't care, and you just want to score 130 points, sure, he can be a 5-out center.
Yeah, like for the Hornets.
Yeah, in the same way, like Ben Simmons is a 5-out center. Like obviously different style of player, totally, but like size wise, like so yeah, they're literally, now you're right. They went basically from what we thought was having one reliable point guard to having one center, like literally on the roster. And even like Luka Garza is bigger and like a little more physical. Like he's not that big either, actual size. They've got one guy, and that is just going to make life tough. And I've kind of hinted at this. I think defensively, and I don't know if it's a switch that'll really flip, but like I think they're going to have to try to play more of like that 21-22 defense where it's like forced turnovers, chaos, that kind of thing, because I don't think they're ever going to be good on the glass. But that team that year was, decent defensively because they forced so many turnovers, even if they got bullied on the glass. And for the minutes that Rudy isn't out there, that does feel like they would have to morph into their identity if they're going to get more stops and be better on that end.
Well, and that team played so hard defensively.
Right. And this team is like almost a little too like established to play as hard as what it kind of is feeling like at times.
That really stood out to me again in the San Antonio game, which I do kind of not like to be picking at effort in that game in particular.
Yeah, I get it.
But it's because of the back-to-back. But I was just going back and looking at some of it from that game, and it's like they're playing against Chris Paul and they're playing against Victor Wembanyama, and that is proving to be like a scary 2-man game given the smarts and size there. But it was oftentimes Chris Paul and Jeremy Sohan when Rudy was off the floor. And so now it's like Nas and Randle are the big, and they just got cooked in pick and roll there all the time. And it was Nas really not really like sitting down and getting in to defend, and like, is he back? Is he up? It was just, there was nothing really to take away those Chris Paul pocket passes to Sohan. That was just like over and over again. And then,
or anything Chris Paul wanted to do.
Yeah,
to be
really.
honest, like you said, he was kind of in no man's land. Like it would be like when Carl would sometimes be like in a drop, and he'd be like, "Well, I'm not sure what he's taking away here."
I think I have one of these clips here, like somewhere. This is literally just one. I labeled this Chris Paul picking it apart.
Yeah,
like Jaden's working here, right? Jaden's
Right.
picking him up here, working. There can't be this space there.
Yeah.
And then like Mike or
And that's
somebody
that's too far out for like somebody else to be like, at
right.
the
Like
nail,
what is
you
Nas?
know? Like,
What are we scared of Chris Paul doing at 30 feet? And like Ant doesn't come over. It's just frankly not a good defensive team.
Right.
Period.
Right.
Like it's just and that's one possession. But when
if Chris Paul wanted the pull up three there, he still had it.
Sure,
Still
he was
had
just
it,
like, this is a better option.
Yeah,
right here
right,
too.
right.
And the numbers bear this. I'm not saying the Wolves are a bad defensive team, because they do have Rudy Gobert and they do have
Right.
Jaden McDaniels. Nikhil's been awesome defensively. I think we feel Dante's impact more and more on that side of the floor. But Rudy out of the game and Reid and Randle are on the floor. It's 125 defensive rating.
That's hideous.
Which is awful. And the offense has been like kind of decent. Like we've liked that. They have a 117.4 offensive rating when Reid and Randle are out there. So like that's cool. That's fine as long as you're guarding some. And this weekend that group got beat up by Aaron Gordon, by Jeremy Sohan, and oftentimes in very similar ways between those two. So the Randle fit thus far, like I don't think we can be like, oh, this isn't working.
Right.
Like that, because that isn't true, because the offense is really working. I like Randle in this offense. Like that's an A to me right now, given where I was at in my head. But the defensively, I don't know. Maybe it's the other surrounding pieces or whatever. But it's just confusing the identity of this team, I think, or what we thought the identity was a season ago, right? And that's why I think they're 3-3 right now.
Yeah, they don't. You're right. It just doesn't really have an identity right now. Like that is true. Like I just looked it up just for reference because I was curious. Like Nas and Julius, when they're out there together, the team has a 44% rebounding percentage, which it's not good. That obviously also plays into the defense, everything. But yeah, I mean, like that was what kind of stood out to me about the Spurs game. And I know they lost some back-to-backs last year too, but and this was a tough one. But there was not like a game last year, even on the second half of a back-to-back. Like this team played in Orlando, had flight issues, went to Boston, didn't have Mike, didn't have Rudy, and went to overtime. Like
grinded that game.
They grinded it out, and they did that in so many cases. Like think about the Denver one after the Utah game last year. Then they come home, play Denver. Jokic and those guys are playing. It's just Nas and Luka, it comes down to an Ant 3 at the buzzer that just doesn't go. That is like they were grinders. Like it was every game they were in your face, and in the playoffs you saw that it was like, damn, this team like just outplays. They just outwork everybody. And I know it's just 6 games in, but right now they don't have that. They look a lot easier to play against this year in a lot of senses. And part of that is kicking yourself. And like when you don't rebound, when you turn the ball over, like that gives teams easy buckets. It gives them a lot of life. It gives them a lot of confidence. Like where last year's team kind of beat you down in every way because nothing they did was like giving you something easy.
Right.
So you had to earn everything. And I think it's really tough if you want to be this team that like suffocates you defensively and is so great on that end. And that's like, kind of makes it so you are almost unbeatable some nights. Like you can't do that if you're making some of the consistent mistakes. And I don't know if it's just so much cleanup as like, can they fix it? I think probably yes. I think they can get better in these areas, but but right now it's just like they just don't look like imposing, I don't think, and even close to the same way they were a year ago.
And if they're gonna be less imposing defensively, they need to be better offensively. And I know it's like only 6 games in, but it's kind of like it's a classic situation where the stats really fit well what you're talking about. They were 16th on offense last season and 1st on defense. This year so far, they're 16th on offense and 18th on defense.
Yeah, right.
Like it, and so like again, I do think, and I honestly think that 16th on offense undersells it a little bit, because I do see a path, particularly given how, just Ant is leveling up as an offensive player and playmaker. We're going to talk about that stuff too. I do see a path to a top 10 offense for this team.
Yeah.
And to be fair, we were having very similar conversations, you and I, last year that sounded a lot like this, that were all pointed at the offensive side of the floor. And we're like,
they finished at, they didn't get better.
No, they didn't. I know. So I'm just saying it's
Right.
like, it's kind of swapping one side for the other. The question is, the concern I would have is I don't think this group has the potential to be the number one offense in the league.
No.
Top 3, top 5.
I'm not sure if I do either.
I don't think that's there. So it needs to be, and I think this was the aim of the trade, right? Like, rather than being first and 16th, be maybe top 10 and top 10 at least on both sides of the ball. And right
because
now,
that's what title teams are generally.
Mm-hmm. It is.
I think I asked Mike this at some point. I don't have the quote, but like I asked, would you sacrifice with this team, the roster makeup being a little worse defensively, to be a little better offensively? And he, I don't remember the numbers he said, but yeah, he's like, if we fell to this point, obviously we want to be as good as we can defensively, but if we fell to, 6th or 7th or whatever, but offensively we get up to like 8th, he's like, I think that would be a trade-off that would help us in the long run. And I agree with that. And I think that makes sense, like in the big picture vision, but like the numbers you stated, like they're not close on either end right now. So I just think for them, and I don't know if it's true. Maybe it's true. I just don't always know if I get the sense of it. But like you're 3-3, 2 of your wins came down to like the last possession. So like it's hard to flip it where you'd have more wins. It's pretty easy to flip it where you're 1-5 right now. And I just think that they're not a bad team. I just think there needs to be some urgency of like we need to play better than this. We need to find our way. Then like defensively, maybe we need to ramp it up, figure out ways that we can succeed in all lineups. Like I don't know, there hasn't been much of that, and I get like it's not panic time, but I just would hope that the urgency is there for them to realize like we're not that good right now, and we should be given our roster. So like we need to figure some things out and get things on like the track of where it needs to go.
And maybe and this would be understandable to be figuring out is who to be playing with who. And that might be part of the answer with this Naz Reid and Julius Randle front court group. Like I sent that to you. There is a 5-man combination of Naz Reid, Julius Randle, Nickeil Alexander-Walker, Dante DiVincenzo, and Anthony Edwards. When those 5 guys are on the floor, that group has a plus 17.5 net rating. And
how many minutes was that in?
It was it's possessions on cleaning the glass.
Okay,
I think it was like in the 60s. So it's not that many. Do I even have this tab up? No, I don't have the tab still. But it's not. But that makes sense to me.
Yeah.
That makes sense to me, right?
You got to be bigger everywhere else. You have to be bigger everywhere else if you're not going to be as big down low. I agree with that.
Well, we said that after the Lakers game, right? Yeah. Where it was like that was the first look of Rudy checks out and it's Naz Reid and Julius Randle, and the Wolves go zone and the Lakers eat that up. And I remember at the time being like, man, why isn't Jaden out here? Like, that actually isn't that group. And I think part of this overall is that Jaden hasn't played well.
Correct.
In the first 6 games. So maybe that even boosts your offense more if Jaden, the barometer of the offense, as Finch always says, if Jaden's playing better offensively, and he should be helpful in being able to bolster that group with size, physicality at the point of attack. I mean, Nickeil's just playing better, period, than him right now. So it makes sense that he's in that group. But you said just like figuring it out. I do think I'm at the point where there is like the personnel to figure it out. There is the time to figure it out.
Yeah, I agree.
I'm not like, nope, need to trade for a backup 7-footer right now. Like that's the way, because and some people are probably thinking that, but if you bring in another center who's now going to play the 18 minutes that Rudy's out of game, then all right, you're going to cut down Nickeil's minutes. You're going to cut down Dante's minutes. I mean, it's the same thing. They need to make it work with this grouping, with these 8 guys. And in certain combinations, they have really well, better than I thought. And some are just sinking. And that is a 3-3 team.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. Like I do think I still like the vision even Mike laid out in that one answer that I wish I remembered exactly. but like the idea of like the 6th best defense and the 9th best offense, like that's still very much like is realistic in my mind. Like that they could by the end of the year will get to those types of numbers, and you'll be like, they're just a really good, well-rounded team. Like, and I think they had the personnel to do it. I'm just totally just saying, like, I hope that they realize, because it hasn't come through like totally clearly, and we weren't there after the San Antonio game of like, hey, we're actually not there right now, like, and here's what we need to fix, and here's where the urgency has to kick in. That's it. But I do agree with you. Like, Ant brings a certain measure of physicality when he's locked in, and Jaden can too, and even Nikhil can. Like yes, the size was there, and maybe the size helped them like be even more aggressive. But like it was that those guys sometimes would make ball handlers' lives just utter hell. And I don't feel like we've seen like even those like 5-minute pockets of that, where
A little bit in the Denver game. Like
yeah,
there's been like
sure,
a couple of pockets, but I'm with you, nowhere near the volume of pockets.
Yeah, yep. And that Denver game is one where you think you should have seen it a lot, right? Like they didn't like when Murray's not out there, they don't really have a ball handler. Like Russ is a very loose ball handler. Like you can, where it's like, oh, okay, there was 4 turnovers that led to 12 points the other way, like, and now all of a sudden the Wolves just went on an 18-0 run and this game is over.
Right.
There were so many of those last year, and it always stemmed from their defense. And I just don't even know. Like the rebounding is obviously the biggest issue defensively, but I don't know that we're seeing enough just like of the harassing defense. And like we always said, that's hard to do for 82 games. Like it is hard to stay locked in like that. But we're just
feels
not
like
even,
they need it.
Yeah. I mean, you at least need it for some, like you can
Yeah.
dominate 10 minutes of a basketball game and win. And I just, there aren't enough times where it feels like they're really dominating for those 10 minutes. But
do the thing where you get the lead and then just put them away with your offense. Like Ant was saying after the Denver game too, like if this group doesn't have that defensive teeth, then you got to be killers offensively, and put games away on that side of the ball. And again, those are things.
Plenty of teams do it.
Yep.
And you're all right. Like you talk about the size and like the lineups you list. It is true that Mike looks smaller when they aren't as big out there. Guys like that, like when you are so big in other areas, like you can always handle. Like Mike could be out there and be like, well, he's the one small guy. Like so, it's not really a big deal. And even he's long, in terms of like wingspan and whatnot. But now when you're not long anywhere, like guys who are a little smaller, like that's more noticeable. And that's why I think that lineup where you listed, where there is nobody who is small,
right,
that can kind of compensate for the lack of like insane size.
Yeah, and I think that'll be an adjust. I mean, we've seen Finch and Mike Nori kind of adjust along those lines, and I would assume they do. Let me grab our first break here. Let y'all know that today's show is brought to you by Falling Knife Brewing Company, and if you are looking for a place to watch the Wolves games this week, head over to Falling Knife for the Hornets matchup tonight. It's an 8 p.m. tip. If you want to go out and have some beers for all the Wolves games, they have the projector screens down. They have the sound playing on in there. So tonight for the Hornets game or the Bulls game on Thursday, maybe you're thinking ahead to family coming in for Thanksgiving or whatever the week before, or something like that. If you want to have a night out, go to a brewery, go for a Wolves game. They always have the games on there. They also have Rectangle Pizza there 7 days a week this season, and they have the beer that we partnered with them on called Second Apron. So just want to always have that on your radar for a place to go watch Wolves games. That's Falling Knife Brewing Company in Northeast Minneapolis. We're also brought to you by Adriana Lonick at Coldwell Banker Realty. And if you are in the process of buying or selling your home, you need a realtor. And we have a promotion going right now where if you set up a free consultation, a free strategy session with Adriana, then you are entered to win some Wolves tickets. So, if 20 people sign up for a strategy session with Adriana, one of those 20 people will get some lower level tickets to go to a Wolves game. But the real thing is if you're buying or selling your home, you need a realtor. You need somebody to help that process with you. And Adriana is going to be there consistently. You can go to thedancingrealtor.com for more information on what the strategy session involves or how she would be able to help you. You can also call or text her at 715-304-9920. Those numbers and website are all in the show notes here. And again, mention this podcast when you contact her, and you will be entered to win some free Wolves tickets. All right, Jace. I want to. I mean, I think we kind of brushed over some of the good stuff in the Denver game because that's how my brain works. Is I'm thinking so much more about the most recent game. I think we would have came on here, if we would have recorded on Saturday morning right after that game and been like, what Rudy did there, the kind of consistency to that game and being able to take that Denver team on and take them down, particularly late in the game, that's what really stood out to me. I still think of Denver. I know they didn't have Jamal Murray at the end of that game, but Denver's a tough team to come back on. Nikola Jokic is a tough team to come back on in fourth quarters late in the game. And they really did that. Rudy, we talked about his last kind of minute of the game, but it was a really good Ant close to the game there too. And on the offensive side of the ball, I saw Ant's little Ephraim quote after the game there. But Jace, who asks better and more professional questions than I do,
I don't agree with that.
Asked a better question right after it. It's funny. It was a really, really good answer from Ant right after that. So I'll play both. They're back to back right here, and then we'll talk about kind of Ant's weekend.
Ant, what would you say to somebody who said you're shooting too many threes?
Fuck them. Simple, yeah.
You might already touched on this, but like you enter the game in the fourth and things were kind of slipping away, but you didn't like press the issue. Like I feel like you would have done that.
Yeah,
in the past.
last year, yeah.
Yeah. What goes through your mind then of just like, I don't know, and where does that trust come from of like, let's just keep playing the right way in return?
I think that's good. Me and Mike was just talking about it. Like he said, he think this was the best like 3 minutes in the fourth quarter I've ever played in my life, because they was doubling. Like they always do that. Like Denver does a great job of let me play. In the fourth quarter, they just trap the shit out of me. So that's what they was doing. And I ain't gonna lie, I was getting frustrated, but I was like, man, I can't come out here and force shots because you're already down 10. So if I do that, I'm gonna look crazy. So I was like, man, let me just trust the offense. And then we was making shots, getting stops. And then the one time they didn't double, I was like, fuck it, let me go. So just, learning the game. And plus, like I said, playing in the USA this summer, like watching Bron manipulate the game. He knew when to get to the hole. He knew when he could take a three. Like, just learning little shit like that, man, that helped me a lot.
That's like the hardest time to fight the urge, right?
Yeah, for sure.
10,
yeah.
And then they're just
to play hero ball, you know what I mean? So, like, just learning. And Finchie gonna cuss my ass out anyway if I play hero ball and it don't go the way it's supposed to go. So I ain't want to get cussed out tonight.
So, Jace, like, we're talking about what in ways romanticizing the team from last year and what that defense was. That group had its issues too, and the main one that I think of when I think of last season's team's issue is late game offense. And those are
really since Finch, Ant's whole career,
right?
Ant's whole career,
and I think it's Ant. I mean, I think Ant was the primary culprit in that, in not having figured out what he just said to you. He is starting to figure out, and having that is an important thing that is real. I don't think that's us putting, polishing a turd here or anything. Like, yeah, there's some issues defensively with this team that are a product of, the roster changing, but there are elements of this team that already look better than last year. And the late game offense is that, and just the offense overall is to that too. And so I think we can kind of separate some of these things and should acknowledge that the offense, and Ant specifically, is playing better and playing smarter. You think about him at the end of that Denver game. I think about him at the end of that Sacramento game, specifically, at that last play where he got to the basket, got fouled, hit both free throws, and won the game. I'm curious if this feeling sustains of their maturity in late game. We get 25 games from now, how much we feel that, you know what I'm saying? And like how many more when we go, yeah, man, they've been kind of locked in late game offense. That's probably won them 3 or 4 more games. And it kind of feels like they're going to need that, given that the offense for the the defense for the 48 minutes just isn't going to be there to the same degree. So I'm really encouraged by that part of kind of keeping them in, or maybe having them even come back late in games now, when that was not the feeling I would have about the Wolves offense late in games in fourth quarters last season.
Yeah, I mean, it's already won them 2, right? Like it has won them 2. Like they were kind of dead in both spots. And came.
Man, can't we just think of like 3 Denver games just off the top of our heads where it's like, yep, it's close, 4 minutes left in the game, and then
it's over. Yeah,
it's over, right?
Yeah. Yep. Yeah, 100%. And like that's not even to say that when you just wanted to like keep playing offense and they had to make good decisions that you like don't want him to shoot, like, and I think you can easily write off 1 or 2 possessions in down the stretch where you're like, yeah, okay, he forced that one up. Like the best player on the team will do that. You turn on any NBA game, like the best player on the team will take 1 or 2 where you're like, that might not have been the best look. But it's kind of like written in their DNA. It's what maintains them as a threat, whatever, all those things. But if like 70% of the time you just keep playing good offense, like, and then you mix in those other possessions, like that's kind of the perfect mix throughout the whole game anyway. And to maintain that mix in crunch time, like that's huge. And then trusting your teammates, and so then your teammates in crunch time are like, I might get the ball here. Where I think in the past it'd be like, oh my God, he just kicked to me. I did not expect that. And now I'm shooting this catch and shoot three with 7 seconds left on the shot clock. And guys will tell you, like, it's not an easy spot to be in to hit a shot. Some guys are better at it than others, but when you're not thinking the ball is coming to you, it's really hard to capitalize. Yeah, like game offense lost them a lot of games, and I think your point about how they might have to play more of those, incredibly true. Like if you're not dominant defensively, you're probably like you're going to see more of those. Like you were up 10, and now you're up 2 with 2 minutes left because the other team goes on and 12-4 run or whatever the case may be. Like you're going to just have more. Many teams play a lot of games decided in the last 5 minutes. And the Wolves didn't have a lot last year because they did blow a lot of teams out. And that's a credit to them and how they played. But like it does make it then when you face like a Dallas, you're ill-equipped when the time comes to win those games, to out-execute, especially when your offense in those spots has been so subpar. Like Dallas will play a lot of games that are like decided in the last 5 minutes, and they just know like they will win those games. Like if Minnesota can get to a point where they're like, actually, we think we'll win these games. That's a huge bump for Minnesota. And I will say, Ant doing all the right things. It is massive on nights like that Nickeil Alexander-Walker hits the shots, because all that does is like put in the bank of like, yep, it does work. Okay. Yeah. I got off of it. I trusted the offense more. I didn't just, like he said, play hero ball, and it worked. So it's massive that in those spots, the teammates come through and just build up the confidence in the system.
And Randle too, like there's multiple now drive and kick options on this team. And I think that there's multiple people for Nickeil Alexander-Walker to get that open catch and shoot three with 90 seconds left in the game, because Ant is playing smarter in those times, and Randle, his style of kind of like get down into the middle of the floor, hit you, and then look to spray it out to the perimeter. They've acclimated to that pretty quickly. Some of the, Ant also, when we were talking to him after the game, mentioned that like there's a good feel for like, all right, I'm getting to here goes Julius. I'm getting to the corner. I'm getting set. I'm looking for my kick out pass. I think what Ant said is he goes, I know when Julius starts going down there, I need to be at the corner or the top of the floor, because those are the places where his eyes are going to be going to look for me if he doesn't have the shot to take there. That's feeling good to me. That whole overall process there of, having another weapon to be able to go to offensively, specifically in those situations, that should make this a better fourth quarter offense team overall. And I think it is leading to the feeling that's what's kind of, it's not just Ant that's pushing I think this is a top 10 offensive team here. There's Randle doing some of that. I've really liked Rudy offensively this year. We've talked about that before, just kind of him feeling out where his spots are better. They're finding him on the roll a lot more, that for him to finish or for him to be a short roll catch and passer. Like there's a lot of things to this offense that I think are specifically relevant to late in games that gives me more confidence in, being able to close out games.
Yeah, and we do still have like that evidence of some seasons where the offense gets significantly better as it goes on here. And it, like I said, doesn't always happen, but they did play pretty good offense in the last month of last season.
Right.
So like if it goes like, if this is now the base and then you build up from here, then yeah, you do see how you get into the top 10. I love like the aspect that Randle brings in terms of like the best way to kind of blow up Minnesota offensively was just to switch everything, if you could do it in the past, because it would totally stagnate things. Like Ant would then just be like, okay, I got this guy on me, I'm going to take him. But like, there's still like, it was a switch, but still heavy gap help. So then he would just end up taking long jumpers against like off the bounce. And then Cat would kind of get too aggressive as well of like, okay, I have it in my head now, I have to score on this guy. And that's where you would get the,
it was very scripted or like telegraphed, right?
My turn. That was it was just your turn, my turn basketball, 100%. And I'm not even saying Minnesota doesn't still do that, but Julius Randle against switches is a dynamite offensive player. Like he just punishes you if you are not big enough. And there's just like it's
and then they got to bring the double
to my spot. Yeah, exactly.
And if they bring the double, like that's when I've gone back and watched these games like after the fact. It's like anytime the double is all the way there, it's like 1.5 guys, good offense comes out of that. Because Randle, which again, we're learning about him, and this was just probably already true, but we have our kind of preconceived notions versus reality. Like Randle's looking for that. He wants that double to come. Whereas maybe, in my head, I thought like he was a guy who was like, all right, here comes the double. I'm going to rip through right before it and try and like beat them there. He's like, no,
Right.
it's okay. Come in, I'm going to look for a pump here, see if I got something. Okay. Your collapse kick. Like that's happening all the time. And the more they put Randle, are able to get switched to target that or to go at Randle when a team is guarding him with DeMar DeRozan. I think Charlotte tonight could have some of that. I think it's another one of the like, probably don't really have a matchup for both Ant and Randle. Like that's when the snowball starts rolling down the hill in a good way for the Wolves, and the offense starts kind of feeding on top of itself. Like the Randle doubles are the perfect example to that. Because he is proven to be the playmaker that Finch said he would be. Pretty sure he still leads the team in assists by a good margin. The Randle element with Ant playing smarter and just more sound late in games. Yeah, this is better offensively.
You do realize like throughout the NBA season, there are a lot of teams that don't really have like a 4 on the floor. And so like, and Randle, if you don't have a 4 on him, and it was the same thing with other teams, but then with Minnesota, be like, well, we're not consistently exposing that like off the bounce. So then you think about the post up, but teams really are conditioned to like, here's how we defend the post up on a size mismatch. Here's how we double. Here's where we like stunt, those types of things. And so they're just prepared for it. And it often ends up in something where you're like, oh, bad pass out of it, turnover, whatever. Like Randle is so good at it's easy to just get the ball at the top of the floor, right? And Randle is so good at, like you said, he's just deliberate. Like he's like, I know I'm bigger than you. I know how to get to my spots. If you don't do anything else, like bring anybody else over, I will just score from my spot. If you do bring somebody else over, now I kick and we just have good offense. We have probably an open shot like that. There's so many lineups, like you said, the Kings with DeRozan, like and like tonight probably as well, like where you just don't have somebody size wise, and so now for Minnesota, that's just an easy go-to matchup, and Randall's making the right play out of it. So like you don't have to actually do anything to get into something good, which is a win for everybody.
I think to kind of feed off of Ant and Julius and this just general idea, if they could get a third playmaker in there, Mike in particular. If he could get back to doing more of the Mike stuff that he was doing a season ago, now I think this gets really hard to guard. If you got the Ant option, you got the Julius option, and you got the Mike 2-man game option with Rudy, all three of those things clicking, like that is a top 10 offense. Easy. That's where the ceiling of the offense comes if you put all three of those things together. Mike hasn't been there thus far, and we could talk about the injury and talk about him kind of maybe ramping up whatever that is. The like advantage or positive that has come out of Conley not playing as well is it's given Nickeil Alexander-Walker more opportunity, and he's been great in all 6 games, in particular in that Denver game, and he actually looks like he's like running the point pretty competently. It doesn't look anything like the preseason when he was running the point and he looked overmatched. It's also, Mike's minutes down also gives Dante DiVincenzo a little bit, more leash, more minutes to play with there. So I sent this to you, but like, are you feeling like Mike Conley is less important to this team this season or significantly less important to this team? Or are you feeling like they really do need to get the old Mike back?
I mean, I think if they want to be like an elite team, they have to get the old Mike back. I still definitely think they need that. And I think the biggest thing is like, yes, Dante has done pretty well, like directing offense, being a playmaker. A lot of assists do come off of like, playing off the catch and then driving in and kicking out. Like he's great at that. Yeah. But I just think like, if you can get Mike going, like you do see like a Dante and just not getting like the offensive explosion Dantes that are probably there as well. And like, just so many things that are like scripted for guys that Mike kind of sets up and organizes. Like his play calling can be huge for them. Like where it's like, what did he even do there? It's like, well, he called the play and then got somebody an easy bucket. Like
that was real. That was, they needed that so badly. Like Mike could be having a bad game shooting everything else. And it just made sense to have him on the floor, particularly at the end of the game, because there was just an adult in the room factor that was palpable and it was leading to more success. They absolutely needed that a year ago. And I'm just wondering how great that need is now. You know what I'm saying? Yeah.
And I totally agree. And especially goes off what we said with Ant. Like if he's not going to hijack the offense, it's kind of a term Finch uses a lot. If he's not going to do that, then you don't necessarily need somebody else to like rip it back from his hands.
Right.
And and that's true. Like, I just think like if they want to be great, Mike has to be out there like playing better. But I think that they are much better positioned to survive, stem the tide, still be good. Like last year, at times like Mike was out there like bad a lot of times. And now I think they can still be good. I don't know if they can be like elite. But I do agree with you that in general, like it's like the fact that they don't have like a point guard in the rotation, backup point guard, like it doesn't feel that extreme, because I do think they've inched a little bit closer towards like, hey, we can play without a point guard sometimes. And Nikhil can look like a point guard sometimes with his playmaking, Dante with his playmaking, especially off like secondary actions, like, and they're getting to those things, you know, like there's always the idea of like, well, this guy could do it in like a secondary action. It'd be like, but if Mike's not out there, they're not getting to one. And now they still are. So like the new guys have understood the offense and fit into it pretty seamlessly, and they have actually played a pretty big role in just creating consistency more on that end of the floor.
Right, which is huge. Which is huge. I just think it's like doesn't need to be one or the other, right?
Yeah,
like,
no, I agree.
Getting that consistency from those other guys, the other ball handlers, that's great. I just think it's gonna be important to get Mike going too, because he's an elite shooter, right? Like
him and Dante, I feel like there's still another level to this offense.
There
like
is.
Those guys consistently knock down shots.
There just is, unless Mike is just all of a sudden completely washed, you know. But if Mike is anything like he was last year, elite shooter, 45%, maybe like 50% of his corner threes, like that's just huge for this team. He's also like not a really hungry guy offensively, right? So you can like, if the other guys are going, he's gonna be like, all right, cool, I shot 4 shots this game and I had 3 assists, but I just kind of helped put it all together. Like having a guy in your rotation that isn't hungry or thirsty, for needing that in the way kind of the other 7 guys, even Rudy is a thirsty offensive player, Mike kind of gets that, like, it's okay if I have a little bit less, so the group, for the greater of the group offensively. I think that's important. Rudy's been good offensively and engaged offensively because other guys have been finding him on the roll, but Mike's the best at that. So I just think there's a lot of reasons to like keep breathing air into the Conley thing. And it's, for the record, I think it's what I don't even think Finch is considering, like,
no.
I
mean, this is a guy who literally like Kyle Anderson played big chunks of bad basketball last year, and Finch never wavered.
That's a great point. That's a great point.
And he said, like, it's just trust, and like we needed him so much in the past, like basically like a loyalty thing. And Mike definitely has that exact same thing built in. And if Mike was just knocking down shots at his normal clip, I don't think like you'd hardly be thinking about any of this right now. And I do have confidence that those shots will fall. I really do. Like nothing looks wrong with it.
Which is what Finch has said every time he's been asked about Mike, is he's like, his threes are rimming in and out. Like, they're gonna go down, and then it's
like if you don't have an off season and then you're essentially ramping up just in training camp and whatnot, like it makes sense you come out of the gates a little slow, especially when you are an older player. And
he's rusty.
Rely on athleticism and make an impact.
He's so clearly rusty, and rustiness often kind of looks like being washed.
Yeah,
and those are not necessarily the same thing. So
just watching the league, the number of guys who I have like declared washed because I watched them twice and they looked bad, and then you watch them later in the season, it's like not washed. Okay,
right. No, that's so true. So I mean, he does need to get better, and like
for sure.
If Mike had been better, they're not 3-3, right? Like you get a little bit better Mike in these first 6 games, and I think they're 4-2, 5-1, something like that. Like he just did that last year and won them games because of it, or just everything was elevated because Mike Conley was playing well. I do think though it is worth saying there's less of a need for him, because there is Dante and there is Nikhil, there is Ant like handling and being more competent there, and Randle is proving to kind of be like the souped up version of Kyle Anderson as another, point forward sort of guy. Like gets
to those same spots, just executes better from them. Like Kyle was like always looking right the right pass, but it's like, okay, but they didn't double.
They never doubled. That's what I was going to say. They never doubled.
And so like there would be like little pockets of games where he would just like feel good about that 10-foot shot and actually go on a little run of his own. But like those were very few and far between because he really wanted to pass out of it. It's like, okay, but everybody's glued to their guy right now. So what are you going to do? Like you are in the scoring spot. Go ahead and finish it. The thing with Mike though, like where you talk about maybe getting up to 4-2, 5-1, it's like that would just be elevating the offense. the warts would still be the warts, like, defensively with the glass, with the small lineup. So like
transition defense.
Yeah, I think it could all be a little better. And obviously missed threes lead the transition the other way as well. So that factors in a little bit there. But like the warts are still the warts. So like I don't know, like I feel like it's like Mike could bring them from like a B+ to like an A game or something like that. But I don't know if it's gonna be like Mike played poorly, so this C- game would have been B+. I don't know if that's necessarily true.
Josh Minott played in the Spurs game. I actually didn't watch, and I wasn't at that game, and neither were you. Did you go look? Did Finch say anything about the Minott minutes or anything? Have you seen anything?
I don't know.
Yeah, I haven't either. So okay, I was just gonna, that would be something to add there. I mean, we could just go off of what we watched for that Spurs game. The Joe Ingles minutes went to Josh Minott. And it happened in both halves. A lot of times Joe is, I think, in
just
4 of the first 5
guy.
games. Yeah, just played only in the first half and then didn't come back in the second half. Minott played both in the first half and in the second half and kind of closed it out once it got to garbage time there too. So it was a bigger role than the Ingles one, but a little bit inflated by garbage time. I thought, I felt bad for the kid. He missed at the end of the first quarter, 3 wide open corner threes. I think that's kind of the cost of not having played him in the first 5 games. Like clearly Minott had a rhythm shooting the ball and all that. And if that was game 1,
more likely to go down.
I think agree. He makes 1 or 2 of those because they were wide open. So maybe that was a little bit of rust there. I do just feel, I mean, I don't know where I'm totally at with Josh Minott as a shooter, but it's a lot. It's up by a good amount from where it was last season. So I'm not going to freak out too much about those missed threes, though. If he does get this role and he plays for a month and he is shooting like 31% from 3, then I'm not sure he's the answer. That's not what my assumption would be, but like he kind of does need to make threes, and I'd assume he would. I like, he brings back more of that length. He brings back more of that size that we're talking about. And I think at a minimum, if Josh Minott is playing, he's going to help the rebounding, because you can tell he's so like, I need to do this. Like he's out there, he's in that position, and he's like, he knows what is going to lead him to playing. He looked locked in on rebounding and guarding at the point of attack when he was out there. And if he hits 2 of those first 3 threes in the first quarter, I mean, we're like, okay, this is Josh Minott's role, and he deserves it. He didn't hit him, but given what the issues have been with this team in terms of rebounding, seeming smaller, and transition, a lack of transition kind of on both sides, like Minott seems like he would check a lot of those boxes, right? Are you just where are you at with this? Because I do think Fitch still wants to play Ingles too, so I'm not sure what the answer was, but Minott played.
Like the conversation we just had about Mike, like how necessary is he given what everybody else is doing? I think kind of eliminates the need for Joe in the rotation with the way they've played. Like that's why he was out there, and he's not bringing much of anything else. Like in terms of, he's like a team position defender, but like not going to be anybody who's going to set like a defensive tone in terms of like ball pressure. Not that aggressive on the glass. Like just not really an aggressive player, especially at this point in his career. And like they do need that out there, especially like at the times when they're small. Like Joe's minutes, I think it's against Denver. All the talk, pair him with Rudy. I don't think his minutes, I think all of his minutes were without Rudy in the Denver game.
Yeah, because they brought Rudy out. That's true. Right. They brought Rudy out early so as to come back in for the non-Jokic minutes.
Right. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
And I hadn't thought of that.
And that was some of the worst that Joe looked, and it's like, well, yeah, Joe can only play with Rudy for many reasons. One is like defensively, and then offensively, that's where kind of his impact comes from. Josh is just a little bit more like, you can tinker with it. He's more malleable. Like it should fit with kind of any lineup to a large degree. I agree with you. Like he can, somebody who can commit himself to the boards, like all these things, he just makes more sense with that second unit of like Nas and Julius, if you want to go that way, like adding just length, if nothing else. And athleticism, which obviously helps on the glass, helps defensively, all of those types of things. Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense just to give him some run. I would say like the San Antonio game, like Watch Jordan McLaughlin do this a lot. It is not easy to go like, I haven't played in forever.
Yeah.
Okay, give us something. Here you go. Get out there. And it's what makes Luka Garza always so like, wow, this is really impressive.
Sure.
I don't know, this guy's never played, and now he goes out there and is like productive and just at least himself.
Looks
like,
the same.
Looks like himself. Yes. And sometimes McLaughlin would be like, well, he just got 2 straight wide open threes and missed them both within the first 90 seconds of action. Like, I've seen that exact movie play out before. It's not easy at all. So I don't judge anybody who, I know like it's a skill being able to come in and thrive in those moments, but it's not like a skill of like, this means you're in the rotation or not in my mind. Like, it's like you're an asset because we can plug you in whenever, but I don't think it should determine whether or not you play every night, whether you can succeed in that rare instance.
Well, and it's what you said at the beginning, which is just right. It's like, how much of a need do you have for that extra playmaker out there, that extra, smart second side guy in Ingles? It seemed like coming into the season, that was going to be a major need because we had all these concerns about the point guard position. Well, Mike Conley isn't playing well, and it kind of feels like that isn't a huge need right now. And maybe that represents itself. Maybe they have a week-long stretch where it's like, oh my God, they turned it over a million times.
Right.
Well, then, yeah. And they're not hitting threes. Well, let's get Ingles back in there for, some better decision-making and some 3-point shooting. Because I still think that's the part of Ingles that, granted, we haven't seen, but dude's an elite 3-point shooter. I mean, he's a over 40% guy for his career. Again, is he now? He's 37, all that sort of stuff. But I got why Finch was going with Ingles at the beginning of the year, because I think I had my same preconceived notions of what this team needed off of the bench as Finch did, or he influenced me to believe what those were. And those have to me just changed some, which is decreased the Ingles need, plus the fact that Ingles just hasn't looked that good and hasn't been making threes. And outside of that Toronto game where he was just peppering Rudy with lobs, like what exactly, what exactly has he brought? I don't think Josh like snatched it up with that Spurs game, but I don't know. Like, who do you think plays tonight?
I don't know. I was thinking that in my head. I was like, we are in this conversation as if it's probably going to be like Minott, but I have no idea who plays tonight. I have no idea.
I mean, and again, go back to Kyle Anderson stuff. Like, Kyle always kept going.
Right. And I'm sure it's very helpful to be able to tell guys ahead of the game, but would it surprise you at all if it's like a game, if it's like a in the moment decision of how did the first quarter go? Like, I don't know. Yeah. I don't know if it would surprise me if that factors into the decision.
I think that's how they do it, right?
Yeah, probably.
It's not super scripted. Like, I don't think their rotations are super scripted. I think
not right now for sure.
Outline.
Yep. And then they kind of read the game. But I think you like to read the game of like who's going to play. But
right.
I don't know. I would probably push forward with Minott just for a few games. Let's see if he catches a rhythm and brings you something good. And because I don't think it's that difficult to go back to Joe whenever. Like you said, if Josh, it's like, oh, he's shooting 28% from 3. Like, okay, I guess that didn't hold up under the regular season. Try again next year, something like that. But I would at least give Josh a little bit of runway, because even in this runway, like he's playing every night, that's still like 8 minutes. Like it's not a huge runway, but like at least give him some sustained night in, night out. He knows he's going in.
I want to talk about the Hornets matchup briefly, but I actually did, for my prize picks for this week, looked at some Wolves stuff, which kind of gives us a way to talk about the Hornets matchup a little bit. I know I tasked you with picking some NFL ones. Jason and I do a prize pick segment every Monday where we just pick a few that we like. Not often are there Wolves ones up there, so I picked a couple Wolves ones. Why don't we start with your 2 picks? I don't know. Did you pick from the Wolves game or from Monday Night Football?
I picked from Monday Night Football.
I figured you might. What do you got?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I actually just clicked on this one website and they just had like projections of what they think players will get. And I was like, this is way easier. I'm just going to go with these guys. Like, they said Justin Watson's going to have 11 receiving yards. So that's way less than 19.5.
That's what you did.
Yeah.
Okay.
I've settled for the fact that I am not like a genius at this.
Justin Watson, less than 19.5. Okay.
Yeah, and they said Baker Mayfield's going to run for 10 yards, not 16.5.
You've really lost
rushing
your confidence.
Yeah, well, yeah. Maybe I'm just smarter now. Well, you already had a bunch of stuff picked. You were all over. You have everybody. You see, you basically projected everybody else in this game.
I was just looking at the Wolves stuff. And I looked at Jaden McDaniels' number for rebounds is 3.5. And he has thus far this season in the games 2 rebounds, 3 rebounds, 4 rebounds, 0 rebounds, 3 rebounds. So he's only had more than 3.5 in one of the 6 games thus far. And I was like, okay, well, that's just Jaden not, he just hasn't stepped up there yet. But I looked it up. He played 72 games last year. He only had 4+ rebounds in 27 of those games. Like, more often than not, Jaden just doesn't get 4 rebounds. And that's just more of a part of this overall like rebounding thing. But I don't know. I think until we're told otherwise, I think we just McDaniels is not a heavy rebound guy. So I'm going to say less than 3.5 rebounds for him. Ants was also at 6.5, but I think that changed. I kind of like both of those guys to not reach their rebounding totals because they just haven't been. I'm looking for Ants here. It went away. I don't know if there's a new one up there, but now they only have it at 4.5 with the Goblin. But I don't have a lot of confidence in McDaniels and Edwards as rebounders right now, even though the group pretty clearly needs him. So I went with McDaniels less than 3.5. And then I saw Naz Reid is at 17.5 points plus rebounds. And I'd take Naz to have more than 17.5 points plus rebounds because one, he could just have 18 points and you got that check there. I do think Naz, though not a great rebounder, is the type of player who listens and is like, hey, Naz, we need you to rebound, and he'll turn up his intention there. So that's the two that I have.
It's also not like it's not like Charlotte's this team that's going to come in and like overly impose themselves on you in the glass. I would say like with Jaden, like he always kind of gets that written off excuse of people being like, well, I've thought about it, and he's guarding the guy on the perimeter. So how is he ever going to get a defensive rebound?
Right.
That's true. Like he's never going to grab 8 because of that, but like he's averaging 2.3. And as Finch has said, like there are rebounds that go to all levels of the court, especially these days with the increased 3-point shot. Like Dylan Brooks, I just looked it up, averaging 4.2 a game. And that doesn't sound like a lot, but it's 2 more than Jaden. And he's also guarding the perimeter, and he has some games where he has 5, 6, 7, just like, I don't think you can write yourself off as like, well, I can't get it's not my job to get the rebound. Like, and I do feel like sometimes that probably happens. He doesn't need to be
without Cat here, it is part of his job.
Right.
I think a year ago it was less Jaden's job, and I made that excuse for him sometimes of like, all right, he's contesting the Luka Doncic setback 3. Are we really expecting him to get the rebound on that? I think there's some fair parts of that, but Jaden isn't on the point of attack all the time.
Exactly. We always write it off as like, yeah, and then that's the example, and then you go, yep, and move on. It's like, well, Luka didn't take every shot in the game.
Right. No, totally. No, Jaden needs to be better there, and there's more of a need for it this year. So I don't know. I would like him to get more than 3.5, but I think if I had to pick a side of that, I'm saying you're
going to go with a long line of history over your optimism.
Right.
That makes sense.
Just for people in general, because I don't think we've talked about Wolves specific ones that much. Like Nickeil Alexander-Walker, his number is at more or less than 7.5 points. He looks like a safe bet for that. I saw his 3-pointers made is 1.5 too. So these are just, I think, especially at the beginning of the season, when you actually have watched all the Wolves games, and these numbers are basically just based off of sort of baked in averages that don't really bring in context. It's a fun extra way to do it. And if you do want to create a daily fantasy lineup for tonight, you can mix NFL with NBA stuff, and check out the Wolves numbers there too. If you use the promo code Dane when you sign up and you place a $5 lineup, then your account will be credited with $50 in promo funds right away. And that's just a fun way to sort of get you started. Maybe as the NFL season's moving along here, maybe it's time to start checking out some NBA ones. Jace, I watched half of the Hornets game against Boston over the weekend. I don't have like a great feel on them yet.
No better team to watch somebody play than Boston too, to really get a feel of who they are.
that was honestly, I was looking at it. I'm like, I have never seen, and this is not relevant for tonight in the Wolves game. Boston gets such good threes. It's crazy.
Yep.
And
you have to give it up because that's like, what else are you going to pick? Like they have 5 good offensive players on the court. You have to be like, well, hopefully they have a bad shooting night. That is literally like the defensive strategy against Boston. It's like, well,
they are just
they have
clean looks, and it's not the step. It's just so many like.
Are you just going to let Tatum finish at the rim, or are you just going to let Jaylen Brown finish at the rim? You know, like it's and everybody can score. Like everybody can play off the catch. Like it's so they can. It would have, if you didn't give up that many threes, they would just have, it would be a layup line.
Right. It's so, I mean, I guess, I don't know, relevant to the Wolves game.
So did you come away thinking Charlotte wasn't good defensively? I mean, that's
sure.
true either way.
Yes, that too. And that kind of got me going of like, okay, can we get like the game where just Dante like wins the game because he makes 6 threes?
I keep waiting for that. Yeah.
Yeah. And you know, this, I guess, kind of takes away from some of Dante's overall value, but it feels like, you know, some of these games coming up against the Hornets, Bulls, Blazers, just lesser teams, like the Wolves should be able to beat them up with the 3-point shooting that they have this year compared to previous seasons. I think there's a lot of room for that. I think there's a lot of room for that tonight against the Hornets, but the Hornets are a lot better of an offensive team this year. And again, I didn't watch that much of it, but you could even just tell from the little I did watch. And LaMelo is like a problem offensively. You know, he's a real weapon there. And again, another opportunity for the Wolves to show their defensive teeth. Like, can you eat up LaMelo in this game by throwing 48 minutes of Jaden McDaniels and Nickeil Alexander-Walker at him? Like, there was some of that last year where the Wolves perimeter defenders would just kind of neutralize a Darius Garland or a LaMelo Ball, you know, and some of that. Like, if they don't do that to LaMelo and LaMelo gets his, like they could, you know, they could lose this game. But the Wolves have the personnel to be able to like cut off the head of the snake there in Charlotte with LaMelo and at least limit them or make, because LaMelo's going to take hard ones if you push him into taking hard ones.
And he easy ones.
Exactly. Though that's his flaw. That's his flaw. But I mean, he's making tough ones too.
Yeah. He's a really good offensive player.
He's a really good offensive player. They're 8th in offense and 29th in defense so far this season. The last year they were 28th on offense and 29th on defense. So we're seeing a better Charlotte team thus far. Should be one that the Wolves are able to take care of, but they take care of it by doing the stuff they did last year. Can you rebound better? Can you guard the point of attack better? Can you not get beat up in transition? Because Charlotte's going to try and run them too. Like this is a grow up and get right game, you know, to play like they need to be playing this season. And if they play like that version, there's no reason they shouldn't at home be able to beat Charlotte by what's the spread on the game? You know, you normally tweet that out. Have you looked that up yet?
I haven't looked it up yet this morning. Let's pull it up quick. I'm curious. I'm curious about the over-under, frankly.
They should be able to slow this team down and beat them up. You know, they are still a bad
9.5
team.
Wolves are 9.5-point favorites. Total is just 226, which isn't like that high. That's another thing I'm curious about. Like you've talked about put teams away offensively. Like you can beat them up, but they actually don't do that to Charlotte very often. Like that was the Cat game last year. And then I think even in Charlotte, like they didn't have Ant, but Mike kind of had to put them away. Like then they lost the year before in Charlotte. Like it's not, I would be more interested to be like, can you get to 130? You know, like we talk about how good the offense is. Like, can you just like have like a dominant offensive showing? You know, like a really dominant one where you're like, wow, everything clicked, and this is what it can look like at its very peak. Because as good as they've been for stretches, and like how we talked about concept wise, it looks good. Like you said, the numbers haven't bore out yet. Can we see that? You know, like can there be a game like that where it's like, wow, this looks like a machine tonight? That I think would be reassuring too, of like, okay, that's what it can be this season offensively. Because there have to be some little samples here of like the process looks good, but the results aren't there. Like at some point, the results have to be a little bit more like evident, I guess.
And I see the blueprint for it, right? Like it's what we were saying. It's Ant keep doing his thing, Julius keep doing his thing, continue involving Rudy. Let's get some more 3-point shooting, and let's get back on defense. Like that should be enough to to slow them down. Be the team that gets out in transition too. Like offensively, there's still not that's the path to 130. But I don't think it's not a lack of ammunition. The Wolves don't have a lack of ammunition to get to 130 or to be able to put somebody away with offense. They just got to kind of stitch it all together. Like we see the four or five things on that side of the floor. Charlotte is a good opportunity again to get right there, and we'll see what happens there. Kyle and I will be talking about that tomorrow morning, right away after that game, and we'll keep moving this week into from Charlotte to Chicago on Thursday. Jace, I appreciate you doing this with me.
Always fun, man.
So next up is Kyle on Tuesday morning. Until then, you can follow Jace on Twitter at Jace Frederick. You can read him over in the Pioneer Press. And until Tuesday with Kyle, he's Jace. I'm Dane. Peace out.
How I'm feeling, man, I hope it never stop, Green and hot so you can find me in the crowd, Don't let standards ever bring you down,